All right, getting right into it today. We're going to be taking a deep dive into a case that I think really captivated Florida and honestly, the whole internet.
Yeah, for sure.
The disappearance and death of 13-year-old Madeline Soto.
Yes.
We've got news reports, police interviews, court documents, even like online
Yeah,
discussions.
like a whole mountain of information.
Yeah, so our goal here is to piece together the timeline,
Hmm.
understand the key players, and grapple with the really unsettling questions this case brings up.
Right.
Of course, we'll be approaching this with sensitivity,
Yeah.
respecting Madeline's memory and the pursuit of truth.
It's important to remember that cases like this often reveal a lot about the complexities of family dynamics,
Right.
societal systems, and even human nature itself.
For sure.
We'll stick to the facts,
Yep.
but we also need to acknowledge the emotional impact this tragedy had on everyone involved.
Absolutely. So let's start with Maddie.
Okay.
She goes missing right after her 13th birthday party. Can you imagine that? Celebrating with friends one day, then vanishing the next.
It's awful.
The early news reports were just devastating, focusing on this young girl who seemed to have disappeared without a trace.
And what's so interesting is how quickly the focus shifted from a missing child to suspicion towards her own family.
Right.
Maddie's mother, Jennifer Soto, and her boyfriend, Stephen Stearns,
Mm-hmm.
gave these early interviews that just felt off, both to the public and to law enforcement.
Yeah.
The inconsistencies, the odd word choices, it all created this sense of unease.
Yeah. Like when Jennifer claimed she saw Maddie getting ready for school, but later admitted she didn't actually lay eyes on her or Stephen's changing story about going to a vape shop after dropping Maddie off. Why do you think those seemingly small details become so crucial in a case like this?
Because they often point to a larger attempt at deception, or at the very least, a reluctance to be completely transparent.
Yeah.
When someone is withholding information or altering their story, it raises red flags.
Mm-hmm.
Investigators start to wonder what else they might be hiding.
It's like a crack in their carefully constructed facade, right? And as police investigated further, those cracks became gaping holes.
Yeah.
The interviews revealed this really bizarre living arrangement. Maddie's bedroom was just a partitioned off section of the living room,
Oh, wow.
while there was a whole separate bedroom that was mostly unused, except when Stefan was staying over.
Right.
And then there's the fact that Jennifer actually encouraged sleepovers between Stefan and Maddie, even when they weren't dating.
That blurring of boundaries is extremely troubling.
Yeah.
It suggests a lack of appropriate safeguards
Mm-hmm.
and a willingness to prioritize adult needs over a child's safety and well-being.
And then adding fuel to the fire, we have the discovery of Stefan's Reddit account.
Oh, really?
His posts reveal quite a bit about his relationship with Maddie and, frankly, some pretty disturbing views on women. What do you make of his online footprint and how it plays into the investigation?
Well, those online footprints often provide a window into someone's true thoughts and intentions, especially when they think they're speaking anonymously.
Right.
In Stefan's case, we see him relishing in what he calls snuggle cuddle time with Maddie
It's so gross.
and expressing a preference for dating women over 30 because they supposedly have emotional baggage and kids from first marriages.
Ugh.
It suggests a pattern of seeking out vulnerable individuals and potentially exploiting them.
And then things take an even darker turn. Police find child sexual abuse material, or CSAM, on Stefan's devices.
Oh, my God.
And some of the images involve Maddie.
Ugh, that's awful.
It's just heartbreaking to think about the betrayal and trauma she must have experienced. But then we see Jennifer's reaction to this news, and it's surprisingly detached. She seems more worried about Stefan getting arrested than about her own daughter's abuse.
This is where things get really complex.
Right.
Jennifer's reaction, or lack thereof, raises serious questions about her role in all of this.
Yeah.
Was she truly unaware of the abuse, or was there a level of complicity, perhaps even a willful ignorance, that allowed it to continue? Her continued defense of Stefan, even after the discovery of the CSAM, is something we need to unpack carefully.
Especially when you consider her response when confronted with that evidence. Is he being placed under arrest because of those pictures? It's almost as if the abuse itself was secondary to her concern for Stefan's legal situation.
It's a perplexing and deeply disturbing aspect of the case that we'll explore in more detail later. But first, let's trace the investigation to its next critical turning point.
Okay, so the investigation continues, and a tip from a citizen leads police to the area where Maddie's body was ultimately found.
Right.
The CCTV footage is just chilling. You see Stefan driving around for hours with her body in his car.
Awful.
The cause of death, strangulation.
It's a stark and tragic contrast to those earlier images of Maddie celebrating her birthday.
Yeah.
The juxtaposition of those two realities, the joy of her birthday and the horror of her fate, is really difficult to process.
It is, and as we delve deeper into Jennifer's behavior throughout the investigation, particularly during that derivative use immunity interview,
Right.
it becomes even more crucial to understand her actions and motivations.
For sure.
We'll analyze her statements, her demeanor, and the inconsistencies that continue to plague her story,
Huh.
but we'll save that for the next part of our deep dive.
Because to truly understand the complexities of this case, we need to examine Jennifer's role closely. The derivative use immunity interview offers a fascinating, albeit controversial window into her mindset.
It really does. It's like she's carefully choosing her words,
Yeah?
revealing just enough to maintain a semblance of innocence, but never quite admitting the full truth. Stay tuned as we unpack this crucial piece of the puzzle in part 2.
All right, ready for it. Welcome back. As we continue our deep dive into the Madeline Soto case, we're turning our attention to Stephen Stearns and his own account of events.
Right. We left off with the discovery of Maddie's body and Jennifer's strange reactions throughout the investigation. But now we get into Stephen's version of events. His interviews with police, even his jailhouse phone calls. What stands out to you about Stephen's attempts to explain himself?
It's striking how he tries to present himself as almost childlike. In his interviews, he talks about snuggle cuddle time with Maddie, calls her his favorite person in the world, and repeatedly blames his ADHD for memory lapses and inconsistencies in his statements.
Ah.
It's almost like he's trying to evoke sympathy or paint himself as incapable of the horrific acts he's accused of.
Is that a common tactic among perpetrators trying to deflect responsibility by appearing less capable or even somewhat innocent?
It can be. Sometimes it's a genuine psychological defense mechanism, a way to distance themselves from the reality of their actions.
Right.
Other times it's a calculated manipulation and attempt to sway public opinion or even influence the legal process.
Yeah.
In Stephen's case, it's hard to say for sure what's driving this behavior, but the evidence, particularly the CSAM found on his devices, suggests a level of premeditation and control that contradicts this image of him as a hapless, childlike figure.
He claims to be a morning person and time blind, but then we see the chilling precision with which he moved Maddie's body, got rid of evidence, and tried to cover his tracks.
Yeah.
It's like he's picking and choosing which aspects of his personality to emphasize in order to fit a narrative that minimizes his culpability.
Exactly. And that discrepancy between his words and his actions is one of the most unsettling aspects of this case. It speaks to a level of deceit and manipulation that's truly disturbing.
For sure.
And then we have those jailhouse phone calls with his parents.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Which add another layer of intrigue to this story.
Yeah, in one conversation, his father flat out asks about Jennifer's potential involvement, even hinting at a bigger conspiracy. It's like even Stephen's own family suspects there's more to the story.
The parents' reactions are fascinating, aren't they? They seem to believe, or at least want to believe, that Stephen is somehow taking the fall for someone else, possibly Jennifer.
Right.
You can hear their anger and frustration, particularly when they talk about the derivative use immunity that Jennifer was granted. They feel she's getting away with something, that true justice isn't being served.
And that sentiment is definitely echoed by a lot of people. Online theories are swirling about a potential CSAM ring with Jennifer as a key player. People are speculating about possible motives, financial incentives, a whole network of connections that extends far beyond Stephen and Maddie.
These theories, while often speculative, highlight the deep unease that surrounds this case.
Yeah.
People are desperately searching for answers, trying to make sense of something so horrific, so seemingly senseless.
Right.
The idea of a larger network, a system that enabled and profited from Maddie's abuse, is terrifying,
Yeah.
but not entirely implausible,
Right.
especially in the age of online exploitation.
And there are some details that fuel those theories, like those reports of Stephen receiving commissary money from a man who was arrested for indecent exposure in front of minors.
Oh, wow.
It adds another layer of creepiness to the whole thing.
It does raise questions about potential connections and the possibility of a wider network. And as we continue to investigate, it's essential to consider all angles to follow every lead, even if it leads to uncomfortable or unsettling truths.
So where do we go from here? We have Stephen's disturbing online presence, his attempts to manipulate the narrative, and the lingering questions about Jennifer's role. What's the next piece of the puzzle we need to examine?
To really understand the heart of this case, we need to circle back to Jennifer and delve into her derivative use immunity interview.
Okay.
It's a controversial legal tactic, one that often raises more questions than it answers.
Right.
We'll analyze her statements, her demeanor, and the inconsistencies that continue to cloud her version of events.
It's like she's playing a high-stakes game, carefully choosing her words, while revealing just enough to maintain a facade of innocence. But as we know, the truth is a way of coming to light. Let's take a closer look at Jennifer's interview and see what we can uncover in part 3 of our deep dive. Okay, so we're back, and it's time to finally dissect Jennifer Soto's derivative use immunity interview.
Yes, this is a big one.
As we mentioned before, it's a legal strategy that lets someone confess to crimes without facing prosecution.
Right.
As long as the information they provide leads to other evidence, it's a powerful tool for investigators, but it can be hard to stomach,
Yeah,
knowing someone might avoid consequences for their actions.
absolutely. It raises a lot of ethical and legal questions.
Yeah.
In Jennifer's case, her interview is a masterclass in carefully crafted statements and calculated omissions.
Hmm.
Throughout the entire interview, she maintains this air of detachment, almost as if she's observing the situation from a distance,
Right.
rather than being fully immersed in the horrifying reality of her daughter's abuse and death. It's a defense mechanism,
Yeah,
a way to cope with something so traumatic,
I get it.
but it makes it difficult to get a clear sense of her true feelings and motivations.
There are moments where she almost seems to be playing a role,
Yeah,
laughing inappropriately, or engaging in small talk about totally random things.
yeah, like she's trying to distract herself or something.
Yeah, it's jarring to hear, especially considering the gravity of the situation.
It's like she's compartmentalizing, trying to separate herself from the emotional weight of what happened.
Right.
That detachment becomes even more apparent when the topic of Stefan's abuse comes up.
Hmm.
She downplays their physical interactions,
Yeah.
describing cuddling as normal and expressing disbelief that he could ever harm Maddie. Do you remember that quote? Before those images, I would have said absolutely not.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's almost as if seeing the visual evidence, the undeniable proof of his actions, was the only thing that convinced her of his guilt.
It's like her perception of reality was so warped that she couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge the abuse happening right in front of her. And even after admitting that Stefan did abuse Maddie,
Yeah.
she still tries to defend him, suggesting that maybe he wasn't fully responsible for her disappearance. She even floats the idea that Maddie might have been trafficked,
Right.
a theory that investigators have repeatedly debunked.
Right. It's like she's clinging to any explanation that lessens Stefan's culpability, even if it means ignoring the mountain of evidence pointing to his guilt.
And then there's that whole issue with her text messages, the one where she tells Maddie's father, "I hope nobody touches Maddie," or tries to film her under the bathroom door. It's so oddly specific, and her explanation just doesn't add up.
Her attempts to downplay those messages are weak at best.
Yeah.
They suggest a level of awareness about potential risks to Maddie
Right.
that she later tries to minimize. And then there's the text to Stefan's father urging him to get a lawyer for Stefan.
Yeah.
Just where her priorities lie, she's more concerned about his well-being than about finding her own daughter.
It's just baffling. A mother who claims to be devoted to her daughter, yet fails to see the abuse happening under her own roof. A woman who insists she's a micromanager, but can't remember basic details about the day Maddie disappeared.
It's a tragic illustration of how denial, manipulation, and perhaps even self-preservation can cloud judgment and lead to devastating consequences. This case forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that sometimes the people closest to a victim can also be complicit in their suffering.
It's a truly unsettling thought, and as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear that we're left with more questions than answers.
Yeah.
We have a perpetrator facing serious charges, a mother who remains an enigma, and a young girl whose life was tragically cut short.
Madeline's case serves as a chilling reminder that we need to be vigilant, to listen to our instincts when something feels off, and to believe those who bravely speak out against abuse. It's a reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places, even within the supposed safety of our own homes.
It's a heavy but crucial message. As always, we encourage you to continue exploring this case, to seek out additional information, and to engage in thoughtful conversations about child protection and the complexities of abuse by raising awareness and advocating for change. We can honor Madeline's memory and work towards a future where children are truly safe and protected. Thank you for joining us on this difficult journey.